I'm Stephanie Goetsch. Welcome to HerExchange. I'm here with very special guest, Brandon Akey, dating expert, author, radio and TV personality, but today, he's all ours. He's answering your questions about relationships. Today in August, all about money matters, and he's talking relationships and money. Welcome, Brandon.
All right, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we're talking about relationships and money. This is a very sticky subject for a lot of couples out there. So help us through this. What do you do when you just don't see eye to eye on money?
Well, the question itself is fairly loaded, so let me kind of break it down a bit. Anytime I'm dealing with clients, I like to make sure that we all have the same definition before I start talking, because a lot of times the biggest problems in relationships revolve around communication and men and women seeing things a little bit differently. So before I like to weigh in on that, the biggest thing that I like to say is I break it down into three different categories: pre-dating, dating, and then in a committed relationship.
Perfect. Pre-dating is brand new. Pre-dating is a brand new term. I like it.
Well, when I look at it, pre-dating is very important because you haven't actually met the person yet. You're still going through all these different pieces. It's the precursor to you being ready for the dating process. So pre-dating is about you being able to attract the individual. Dating, however, is when you meet the individual and you start, the courtship process, but you may not have something, well-defined. Now, a lot of people fit. And I find that a lot of my clients actually fit into that category because there's this gray area a lot of times in a relationship where you don't necessarily know exactly where you stand and all those different pieces.
Absolutely.
That's in that dating realm, that category. Now, the commitment area is when you've actually had a conversation. You've actually talked about a lot of the different things and you understand that both of you want to move forward with the relationship in the context of commitment, making sure that you're on the same page and you're building something together. So I think it's very, very important to understand that distinction. A lot of people confuse dating with a committed relationship, and for the purposes of this, it's important to draw those lines.
Perfect. So the issue of money, should it even ever come up in pre-dating?
Well, it comes out in very subtle ways, and I'll explain it this way. Anytime I'm coaching somebody, when I'm consulting with them, the biggest piece that we start with is to set goals. The important piece is that you have to decide what type of lifestyle you want to live. Now, the subject of money doesn't necessarily have to come up in that pre-dating area because what you're doing in the pre-dating aspect, you haven't met the individual yet. So the pre-dating aspect is about understanding who you are as an individual and then also where you're going to find that person that you need in your life. And there are some different ways that you can gauge, their money status and different things like that. That involves keeping your eyes open, which is the second piece that is very, very important. So setting your goals and pre-dating, understanding who you are, who you want, and what you need in terms of, your financial stability, what types of things you want. Like, do you want a couple of cars, nice luxury, or do those things not matter to you? Do you want your children down the line to be in private schools, blah, blah, blah. All those things go into that equation of your goal setting. And then the other piece is keeping your eyes open.
Let me ask,
so that's
can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Some of that goal setting sounds a little gold diggery. How realistic do you need to be in terms of what you can provide yourself versus what you're looking for in a mate? You see what I'm saying here? It feels a little you're aiming, quite high out of the pot in terms of the money you're hoping to see someone bringing in. How realistic should we be?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and this is a point of apprehension that a lot of my clients have before they understand that it's very, very important. So anytime somebody asks me the question, about is this gold digging and things like that. I know it's a high level of apprehension that a lot of people have before I actually explain where it's coming from. In any relationship, you'll find that the biggest points of discontent and the biggest pieces that cause that relationship to break up, especially marriage in the United States, is money and arguments over money and things like that. So it's important that you have a strong grip on what you actually need. Now, money isn't everything, and I will definitely add that as my first disclaimer. Money is not everything.
Okay.
But I stress to my clients that money is very, very important, and I use the example of, do you want your kids in private schools? Do you want your family to have, this type of house in this region of the United States? Or do you want a vacation home? All those things are important because I have friends who love to travel. And if you love to travel, it's very hard to do when you have kids and things like that. Backpacking and going to hostels all over the world might be fun when you're younger, but you might want to do it at resorts and things like that as you get a bit older and so that money actually helps enrich your life. Now, I don't recommend that anybody, take that userish standpoint and, start gold digging and things like that. But it is important to understand what you want, what you need, and what's going to ultimately make you happy. The reason for those goals is to stop the resentment before it even happens. A lot of times I'll see that, clients I have a lot of divorcees that I work with and things like that, and they will attest that to the fact that they find themselves in a resenting situation when they had a lot of goals that they wanted things for their life, for their children's lives, for their family, and they didn't meet those goals. It's important early on that you set that standard.
Got it. Okay, good. Okay, that was very clear. Thank you. So once you moved into now your dating stage, you're on step 2, which is?
Yeah, so in the dating stage, it's important, and we've already defined, like I said before, that dating is not a committed relationship. Dating is part of that vetting process, part of you getting to know the individual that you set your eyes on, that you found. In that pre-dating scenario, it was very, very important that you had your goals set, but keeping your eyes open. But moving forward in the dating process, now you have to set the standard. Okay. This is very important because you have to become the person that attracts the person that you want for your life. Now that's very, very important because I say this. If you want somebody who is financially stable and you want somebody who is financially responsible, well, they're going to look at you if you can't pay your bills, if you're having trouble making your car note, but you have, $800 shoes on and things like that. They're going to look at you and say, hey, this is somebody that's financially irresponsible herself. Why would I want that person in my life? So it's important that you display the habits that you wish to find in the minute you date. This is the most important aspect there. Because men, all men will attest to this. We watch women, we take a look at what you're wearing, we take a look at how the different things that your spending habits and things like that. It's important because if we take you into our lives, then that's part of the habit that we're inviting that energy back into our lives. So you need to make sure that energy is the energy that you want to be putting out there, and that is what you want to be bringing in as well. The next piece is be respectful. Don't put your date, we're kind of using the wealthy example and things like that he's, in a better position. But I think it's important that, before you understand exactly where he's sitting, don't put him in a bad position or in a bad situation. Because a lot of times guys will try to do what it takes to impress a woman and things like that. And you may not understand that, these guys may like you a lot and they're going to try to move the world for you. But, allow them to do that, allow them to get to know you in a way that's not really putting them in a bad position. Now, if they insist, let's go to a restaurant that's going to cost $300 for a bottle of wine and things like that, well then, let that happen. If that's not the case, then be very cognizant of that and be very respectful because, guys work very hard just as women do. And we try to impress women as much as possible, but at the same time, make sure that, it's manageable. And the important part is that you're getting to know him and he's getting to know you. That's the important aspect of that at the beginning stages of dating. Okay. The last portion is ask a lot of questions, watch, and listen. The reason why I say this is very, very important is because everything you want to know in dating is right there in front of you. A quote that I really, really, I've held close to my heart is one that my sister told me is, love is not blind, it sees more. But because you're in love, you're willing to see less. Now this is so crucial because you'll start to see, if you keep your eyes open and you start asking questions, what type of man this person is or what type of individual this person is. If they go out and they start and everything is fine and they're very cognizant and very mindful of their spending, but then they have a couple of drinks and then they start buying rounds for everybody in the house. Well, think about that down the line. This might be a situation where your kids might go hungry and things like that if your husband, or your significant other goes out on the town and ties one on with his buddies. Right. So it's very, very important to kind of watch and keep track of those things because big deal breakers are there. You just have to open your eyes and be ready to watch for them. The other piece too is that in that dating phase, chivalry isn't dead, but it is the 21st century. So in addition to everything I said before, as a woman, women are making tons of money now, in relation to men, and so it's easy for us to say that men should be footing the bill and things like that, but still offer to pay and things like that. And if he insists that you shouldn't, then let him pay. But that's just something that's out there as well because women are making their own money as well. That's part of that empowerment, you taking control of your own dating life as well.
Absolutely. So things seem pretty cut and dry during the pre-dating and dating because you haven't had to mix and match your finances too much. You're watching, you're paying attention, and you're in a place that's easy to say, no, this doesn't work for my lifestyle, so I'm moving on and making those choices. But it gets a little stickier once you've moved on and you're in a committed relationship, yes?
Yes, it does. Yeah, so, once you're in a committed relationship, now the biggest things are communication. A lot of people, just feel like, things will just work themselves out and, I can, since everybody else is doing it this way, our relationship together will work that way, and that's not the case. Right. You have to be very, very clear and understand what each of you wants in the situation. So ask questions. I know that was the end part of the, dating phase of the money portion, but ask more questions. As you start understanding and that you're in that committed relationship, the understanding is that you're pushing toward building something together. Finances can be part of that in a relationship. There are some guys who want to keep their finances expressly, forbidden for the other person. And I know guys who are like that, but there are other guys who feel like, hey, you know what, we're together, and so we need to have joint bank accounts and things like that. But where it gets sticky is when one person has a really horrible credit score, has tons of debt, all those different things. It also gets really sticky when one person is making gobs of money and the other person wants to make sure, hey, I want to be secure as well since you're my husband or since you're my wife. I want to be secure as well, so why aren't we sharing this, blah, blah, blah. It's important that you have those conversations as early as possible because if you want to make sure that you're on the same page. And if you're not on the same page and you can't get on the same page, then you have to decide, whether or not you want to be in that relationship or not. The second piece is you need to stay true to your goals. Staying true to your goals, like we set out before, very important because regardless of how we try to cut it, your personality is set at a very early age. And there are going to be small changes here and there, but you're still going to desire the same things. You're still going to want the same level of life choices and things like that. And so those aren't going to change. So you have to stay true to your goals, stay true to your values. Otherwise, like I said before, you'll end up resenting the person that you're with. The final piece of that commitment phase is to know your role. Now, this is very controversial, but I have to throw that out there for all of my clients because, again, we're talking about that understanding or that communication, gap between men and women. Knowing your role is very, very important. Like I said before, you have to get on the same page and make sure that both of you are communicating and understand what you want to do financially. Now, within that context, you have to understand where you fit in that equation. And like I said before, if you can't get on the same page, then you shouldn't be in a relationship. However, if you can, then you need to be supportive with his decisions, or he needs to be supportive with your decisions, depending on who takes that foremost role. And then in addition to that, you have to, continue to keep building each other up and helping the relationship move forward financially. It's very, very important.
Okay. Let me go back to an earlier point. You were talking about the division of bank accounts, and I know this is something that women in their late 20s, 30s, 40s that are moving into committed relationships are really thinking about. And it seems generations past, my parents wouldn't have considered having separate accounts. It only made sense. But this seems to be something that's shifting frequently. Now, friends I have are always going towards the separate accounts. Is there a pro or con to that? I mean, do separate accounts mean that you're always kind of keeping that worst case scenario foot out the door, or is it really a smart choice, do you think, in terms of the relationship?
It really just depends on the individuals within the relationship, and I hate to be vague about it, and I don't, but it really does depend on the individuals. Some people that I've worked with will say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Meaning that if you've gotten all the way through the dating process and now you're getting ready to get married and things like that, and it works all the way up to that point without sharing bank accounts and things along those lines, then why adjust it? On the other side of that, some people will say, now that we're one, now we're thinking and acting alike and things like that, we have to be on the same page, which means that our bank accounts are the same, no secrets, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I see points within each of those. The important thing to realize is, like I said before, you'll never go wrong if you keep your goals in mind. You'll never go wrong if you keep your goals in mind. If you keep that communication up and say, hey, honey, I want this, this, and this. Are you cool with that?
Right.
I want this for our family. I want all these different pieces. And like I said before, if you stay true to those, then you'll find yourself in a really great position.
Good. And so why is money breaking up so many relationships? Is it just that people are shutting down that communication, or they weren't clear about their goals going in?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of the two. In addition to that, it is, you'll find, like I said before, you'll find a lot of resentment, and this is from the traditional male side of things, but you'll find a lot of resentment in that if the man is making more of the money, he's taking care of the bills, he's doing this and doing that, but then if his wife is telling him what to do with his money, so she's taking money from him, and this is not I don't mean it to sound, sexist or anything like that, but from one perspective, if she's also taking money from him, but also telling him how he can spend his money and things like that, you can see how that resentment will come. Now, if a woman is the primary breadwinner and those types of things, you can see how that would hurt as well. He takes the money and he's doing such and such things with it, and then telling her what she can do. Don't buy those shoes. Don't do this. Don't do that. That's where that resentment can come in, and that's where it's really, really important just to keep, that careful balance of the communication and understanding what your goals are. Yeah,
very good. And I'll wrap it up by thanking you so much for joining us today. This was fantastic. I expect that the conversation is going to keep going here, the exchange. I encourage everyone to let us know your best tips, comment below, exchange, continue this conversation going. Visit Brandon on his website. There'll be lots of links below and up on your screen here. And continue to follow us on HerExchange for great Money Matters tips. Thanks again.